Hi guys, my name is Leroy Mark,
And I'm Tami Rasheen.
and welcome to our first ever Business of Influence podcast brought to you by Liability Africa.
Super excited.
I'm really excited too, man. You know, we are constantly chatting, Tammy and I, about influencer spaces, about being an influencer and what we do with this business. And we thought we'd bring this conversation to you in your living rooms, wherever you're watching from, in the platform of a podcast. But let's go back 2 steps, Tammy.
For sure.
Right? So, when you're not being a sexy mom who's doing amazing things in the world, what do you do for a living?
I am founder and managing director at Style ID Africa.
Founder and managing director. Thank you very much. And I'm a lowly influencer. What I do is I look pretty for a living. And we work a lot together in the spaces, right? We deal a lot with brands, we deal a lot with the influencer spaces. And we really have had some hectic frustrations about this industry.
And I think it's not just it's the frustrations, it's the challenges, even the successes from all different parts of stakeholders involved in the influencer industry and creator economy. So there really is just so much to talk about. There's so much to educate. We get a lot of questions. So this is really why we're here.
And it really is the most complicated of worlds, right? Because we are seeing the influencer space growing in leaps and bounds. I'm even risking it and saying that it might be the biggest marketing platform ever.
Absolutely.
But there's not enough conversations happening. I mean, my biggest frustrations about working in the business has always been that, the brands don't seem to be hearing the influencers. The agencies don't seem to be hearing the influencers. And I'm sure you've got your frustrations from
Absolutely.
an agency point of view.
Absolutely. There's plenty. But just tell us a little bit about you and your background.
So I'm a lawyer by trade, and I left the industry many, many, many years ago to get into the content creation space. And I think it was really primarily because I love the idea of being able to speak to an audience directly. I found law to be a bit tiring in that way, that you just seem to be sort of, disconnected. But as I've gone along, I've really found that there's so much happening in this space and not enough people are talking about it. And every week when people like me and you meet and we have conversations, we don't seem to have a place to keep it.
Absolutely.
And that's why we came along and decided
to start this. And just for myself, having the brand management and brand leadership background, passion for strategy, there needs to be a thought process involved in the influencer space and in influencer campaigns. So for me, it's such a huge passion to get this educational side out to brands and influencers.
And you work with both sides, so you
Yes.
understand sort of the light and dark of both sides. And I think it's so interesting that with all the elements of how big influencer marketing it really has become,
Yes.
that we haven't had a conversation like this for a long time. So welcome. This is the first ever episode.
To the business of
It
influence.
is a business of influencing. We're all doing it today. It's going to be a wonderful season. We're bringing you interesting conversations every week, dropping every single Friday. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, press the notification button, share, to make sure you're part of the conversation. And of course, we'll have lots of guests coming through sharing their insights, and really is a how-to guide according to us and the people in our circle about to make it in this industry and to figure it out. So I look forward to chatting with you about many, many things, and many of those coming up just after this.
You're listening to The Business of Influence, proudly brought to you by Style ID Africa, the continent's leading influencer technology platform.
Welcome back, guys, to the Business of Influence podcast brought to you by Style ID Africa with me, Leroy Mark.
And Tami Rasheen.
All right, so Tammy,
Yes.
this whole thing about the business of influence, right? Let's go back to the beginning. Now, when we started off with our Instagram and our MySpace pages showing our ages, there was never a thought about an industry coming out of this. It was just a place where you kept your images and your pictures and you'd share with your friends.
Or starting your blog.
Or starting a blog. And even those were new because it was like your Dear Diary, only everyone could watch it. I mean, I remember watching Sarah Jessica Parker in Sex and the City, and she'd be like writing to herself on her MacBook, right? But what is an influencer? But I want to know specifically, where does it fit in the marketing matrix? If I work in a business or own a brand or whatever, where does the influencer fall into the marketing space?
So I think, firstly, what is an influencer?
Yeah.
So Influences and influencing to me is being able to get a message across from your personal, authentic self and how that message is perceived. So, who is listening, who is viewing, and it is about talking about a specific topic in whatever field.
Yeah.
So that is how I have viewed influencing and influencer marketing, or what is an influencer. How that fits into the marketing mix is quite interesting, because initially when influencer marketing or brands were starting out investing in influencer marketing, it was always seen as an add-on.
Yeah.
So
Like a nice to have.
yeah, it was an add-on, and let's carry on with our regular marketing, whatever that may be for a particular brand, and then we'll plug influencer marketing in there. Funnily enough, COVID actually changed a lot of things, and brands had to pivot very quickly.
I love that word. Pivot.
Pivot very quickly. Even agencies had to pivot very quickly. So it was a case of now plugging influencer marketing into the marketing mix, and not just seeing it as an add-on.
Yeah. So if we were to look at like a marketing director of Style ID Africa, right? And you're looking at whether or not you would need to use an influencer.
Yes.
In what cases does influencer marketing even come into the space? When does an influencer as an option even enter the room? I ask specifically because we know advertising and marketing to be the events, the ad on TV, the ad on radio, and all of those above the line things.
Yes.
But we never thought about having someone who has like 5,000 followers talking to their audience about our brand and us paying them. So where as a brand manager or marketing manager do you even start considering that maybe we should have an influencer work on us?
I think it's considered as straight away almost. Now in 2023, it's like, if you are not working with influencers,
What are you doing?
what are you doing? So it really fits into everything, even utilizing influencers for store launches, activations, plugging influencers into the PR aspect from a media perspective. So it really fits into the whole ecosystem when it comes to marketing, and not just the add-on. So influencers can be plugged in at any stage, really.
When did it become sort of the norm to enter into bringing influencers on board? So here's what it looked like in my mind, right? So back in the day, when your TV had a bum, you'd go into TV and you'd watch your show, and then at minute 8 or minute 9 you'd go off to an ad break, and then you'd watch the ad break and you'd watch the ad, and that's how you knew about anything.
Yes.
And then you'd come back and watch the show again, and then as an advertiser you hoped that you'd made an impression to me.
Correct.
In that 30 seconds or whatever it was. Now no one watches television, at least not live television. We're getting it streaming, downloaded or whatever.
Skipping ads.
Skipping ads. And I think that's, in my mind, that's when we stopped needing to just look at above the line, because we couldn't guarantee that people were seeing these things.
Absolutely.
Whereas with influencer marketing, you can almost quantify it, right? You can share how many people have seen it, engagement, and. But when do we then, focus less on just not only the above the line, but including influencers? When in the matrix did it start becoming a real part of marketing?
Help me out here for a second, because it's very integrated.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yes.
It's very integrated, and even utilizing, when it started off with celebrities.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I like where we're going.
So start off with celebrities and endorsements.
Yeah.
And sending product to celebrities, and then getting the mentions and the celebrity endorsements for your brand. And that is how a lot of people perceive how the influencer career actually
Started off. Yes.
And then it's evolved since then into so many aspects. So it really fits into an entirely integrated approach.
I love that it's when you speak about integration, because in my mind, as you were speaking, the first thing I realized was we've actually had influencer marketing way before we had social media, right? Because
Absolutely.
if you look at like whoever, Celebrity X who's wearing something, and then the magazine would say they're wearing whatever.
It even goes back centuries, to be
Yeah,
honest.
you buy because of what Britney was wearing or Christina was wearing, and that's where it starts off. But I want to go back to what you're talking about, so about the tiers, right?
Yes.
Because you said it's integrated, so it was happening with celebrities, but now there's sort of like a spectrum.
Different tiers, absolutely, which a lot of people in the industry actually don't know about.
Okay.
Let's talk from a brand's perspective. Oh, I want to work with influencers. I need to work with influencers. I need to work with influencers, but they don't know where to start when it comes to the different tiers. So just from a educational point of view,
Just for education-ish.
and also at Style ID, we kind of change it a bit. So there are industry standard tiers, and then we just break it up a little bit further. So your nano influencers are your 1,000 to 10,000 followers.
And doesn't matter which platform.
No. 1,000 to 10,000 followers. Your macro influencers, it's actually quite a vast range. So it's 10,000 followers to 100,000 followers.
Okay.
Whereas internally at Style ID, we actually split that into macro low
Macro.
and macro high.
Okay.
Because it's quite a vast, 10,000 to 100,000 followers, that's massive.
90,000 difference.
Exactly. So we've got macro low, which is 10,000 to 50,000, and then macro high, which is 50,000 to 100,000. Then it goes into mid, which is your 100 to about 200,000 followers, and then you start getting into your macro and then celebrity.
Yeah, because I mean, they have a big M next to theirs.
Correct. And just on that, so it's not that the higher the following of an influencer you work with, you're going to reach your KPIs and get the engagement that you need. Whereas it's the lower tier influencers that get you the engagement.
You're alluding to something that I recently found out about, how even in those tiers, we're looking at how we use and utilize the people in those categories.
Yes.
So for instance, if you're dealing with like a celebrity, you would use them for a different purpose altogether.
Absolutely.
What are the purposes of those tiers?
Okay. A lot to talk about there.
A lot to talk about.
Yes.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll cut to ad break, and when we come back, Tami will go deep into the tiers and how we use those resources of the influencers and their numbers. But please don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe. Also, let us know what you think about the division of numbers. I mean, is it making sense? Is it too low, too high? What if I have 5 followers and they really, really are loyal? All of that and more coming up.
Whether you're an aspiring content creator or a bona fide influencer, join our community of over 40,000 registered creators to showcase your work.
Welcome back, guys. So in the last segment, Tami, you were chatting about how you have the tiers of influencers and what we utilize them for. And I thought it would be interesting for us to give it the time so we can chat about it properly.
Absolutely.
But also, you have a very interesting way of explaining how the different tiers work out.
Yes.
So maybe by way of example, let's say I'm a beauty influencer.
Fine.
Let's not say which way I am under categories.
Okay.
We have a beauty campaign at Style ID Africa, and now we need to use the resources of all these tiers.
Okay.
Right. So help me out, starting off with the lowest tier and moving our
So
way
what's
up.
key to understand across the board actually is that different tiers, and this is how we do it at Style ID, and how we educate brands. So different tiers of influencers should be used for different purposes. So let's start with your nano tier.
Yes. So that's the lowest.
Yes, that's your nano guys, small followings, have the highest engagements. Their purpose is to educate.
Okay.
Okay, so whatever that may be from a briefing or product perspective from a brand, get your product for X amount at X store educate on various aspects of the product and the brand.
Are they more like the foot soldiers? So they give me all the info that I would need to get product, let's say it's a shampoo, from shelf to bathroom.
Correct.
Those are the foot soldiers we send out.
Yes. They are educating on the product, the price, the promotion, the store, the location, etc. So that's education. Then you bump up a notch to your micro guys.
Yes.
Okay.
So these are the guys who are from 10,000 to 90K.
100K followers, broken up into micro low, micro high. They the guys that are going to create a little bit more quality content from an aspect of styling, tutorials, fitting into their lifestyle. So how is that shampoo, for instance? How are they using that shampoo?
Which is different because it's not about telling me about where to get it, how to get it, because we know that now from the nano influencers. These guys are telling me about how to use it,
The benefits.
and also slightly more aesthetically pleasing, a bit more quality as far as the richness of the content. All right.
So that's where we would advise to slot the micro guys in. Then we bump it up a notch to your macro. Your macro influencers are very aspirational. It's a case of when they publish content, oh, I want to use that, or I want to go there. So it's very aspirational content, but they will just publish, this is the brand, or this is the product, not styling it, not promoting the price or the location of where to get it. It's a macro influencer just speaking on the brand in general, being aspirational.
Yeah, it brings to mind for me when you see an ad, right, for like a big soda company, right?
Yes.
They don't say on the ad, this is where you buy can A. They just go, this is what our brand's about.
Correct.
Drinking it in the sun on a weekend, and this is how we do it, and leave it there.
Yes.
And sort of, so those, your macros would be then the people who would come in and sort of slot into that narrative.
Absolutely. And what we try and do, depending on the brief or the objective or the KPI of the campaign, is either focus on a specific tier or have a hybrid approach.
Okay.
So utilizing, let's say, one macro influencer to speak about the brand in general, however many macros and however many nanos, but each has a purpose.
Yeah.
And that way it's much better and easier to monitor the metrics.
I like what you say about having the micros be about more with the brand, right? Because in my mind, I can see they might not necessarily be like the celebrity, but they have like almost celebrity like level, in that they're really popular from their social media. People know that they do many, many brands and they take their word for it. And maybe just before we get into our next point, I'm very interested in trying to understand then, when you start a campaign and you're looking at these influencers, when you look at the top tier guys, and there's many of them in the same space, what for you then becomes a differentiator? Because as you know, the beauty space, for instance, is heavily saturated. There's many, many people in that space. Fashion,
very saturated.
fitness. So when you're looking at those, because for me it's very interesting to see how certain brands would have like 4 or 5 of these macro influencers, but in different cycles. You have them like, do you choose them because they as a brand have something coming up? I'm releasing a movie, I'm releasing,
I think that's one of the things you and I were chatting about in terms of those categories are extremely saturated. There might not be a perfect answer to this, but I think it's a discussion that needs to be had, because beauty in all its categories, skincare, makeup, fragrance, etc., and then fashion and the fitness, what makes influencer, or what gives influencer X the differentiating USP to influencer Y? what is that? Because there's so many influencers to choose from in these various categories. How are the creators and influencers standing out? And what makes brand X or agencies such as Style ID choose that particular influencer to work with? So it's a much broader discussion. But there needs to be, for us at Style ID, and what we look out for is there needs to be some sort of brand affinity.
Yeah.
And choosing an influencer that is not going to chop and change brands all the time. There has to be some sort of brand loyalty and brand affinity to that particular brand that they are promoting.
Yeah, I think across the board. I think
Yeah.
even as a nano influencer, you're going to make sure that you're not becoming a classified,
Yes.
section of the newspaper. But for me, I think when we come back on the other side of this, I want to chat about sort of how do you make sure that your real estate that's outside of your influencing influences what you do with your businesses, with the brands, that and more coming up just now.
Amazing.
The Business of Influence is brought to you by Style ID Africa, the continent's leading influencer technology platform.
Welcome back to the Business of Influence podcast, brought to you by Star ID Africa with me, Leroy Mark.
And Tami Rashid.
I love doing that. It's like bouncing it off over there. So we've been chatting all episode long about the business of influence and sort of the basics about this industry. But for me, one of the interesting things that I found about this industry as I got into it as an influencer was that it almost happened to me in a way, because somewhere along the line, I got into traditional media. I was on radio and television for a while. And that's where my numbers really shot up, right? But I'm noticing now that there's many people who are coming into the industry and getting quick following, right? Because of certain things that they do, some sort of real estate that they have, where you've got people who are on TikTok with challenges, you've got people who are doing the dances, or you've got people who are on television or on radio and then doing like secondary influencing. So my question to you then, Tami, is there a place for people who don't necessarily have that real estate outside of influencing? So I'm not an actor, I'm not an athlete, I'm not a musician, I'm just, what you're calling Gen Alphas, the youths
Extreme youths.
who are born into social media, and so they don't have the first mover advantage as part of their lives, but they want to grow and build their system. Is there a place for you?
There's definitely a place. There's definitely a place, and especially for, let's just talk Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
That is, let's just call it your 10-year-olds.
Okay.
Averaging.
All right, so like pre-teens.
Yeah, preteens, and that bracket falls into that. And they've grown up and in their laps is social media. And scrolling through TikTok, watching, just random content, and that content that they're watching doesn't have the backing of other real estate, as you say. So there's definitely a place for it. Look, people's attention spans, are less than, 5 seconds or something. So you've got to grab straight away, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your influencer that has that TV background, radio background, entertainment background, comedy, etc. It's literally everyday people
Doing their thing.
doing their thing and building that audience on the most random types of content.
And I know we plan on chatting about it at some point in the future, but for me, TikTok is so interesting. Because it seems like it's the place where you now get the real estate. So where you used to have to be on television, and we're chatting about earlier on in the episode about how television from a viewing in real time point of view has become, declining. We're more streaming or downloading
Absolutely.
things. That TikTok seems to be the place now where if you make it big on TikTok, you can then syndicate your stuff onto other platforms. Let's chat about authenticity.
Okay.
Because if I'm on TikTok and I'm doing a challenge and I'm dancing or cooking or whatever, then there's a lack of authenticity because I'm sort of doing the stuff that's trending. Like for me, for instance, I just don't do cooking content. I'm a good cook. I can make really good meals.
Tell us a bit more about that.
When I started off in the industry,
And you've been approached by
brands.
brands.
And they say, listen, just do a quick, how to make food with this. And I just don't do it. Because I know it's something I don't care to be involved in.
To me, that is authentic
Yeah.
because you did not choose, you did not work with that brand because true to your authenticity, it just didn't fit into
Yeah.
into you.
I don't even know the language of how to
Yes.
cook as an influencer. Like I know this tastes nice, I know put it in the oven and put it on high. Where you hear where you hear content creators who are in the food space will talk about, how you need to work the gluten out of the dough. And you're like, but where's the gluten coming from? And I think for me that's why I'm very adverse to doing any food content. I'm not against it completely, but it has to make sense.
But I think that's where one as an influencer needs to identify a niche to a point. People still have their passions. For me, it's gym and training, and not that I have hundreds of thousands of followers.
Coming
but,
soon, Tammy, coming soon.
But I'm not, or should I say, or I'm not going to post me doing my squats and leg presses because for me, that's not my niche. I would like to talk about entrepreneurship, thought leadership in business, influencer marketing. And then if I had to go and post my gym sessions or a brand saying to me, eventually I'm going to get a brand deal and they want me to promote a specific brand, wouldn't make sense to me and what I want to get across.
And I think that's when you start becoming the classifieds, where they know we'll give you anything and you'll post it. We know if you give you any product.
And I think influencers need to really take that into consideration from an authenticity perspective, and specifically as a influencer marketing agency and platform, we really look out for that when we are searching and discovering for influencers on our platform as well, and how authentic they really are.
I think once you know what you're about, you become very circumspect about jumping up and down. But I think also the temptation of the bag is such a big thing. And I think somewhere in the season we need to talk about the temptation of the bag, okay? Because that is a big, big issue why we take up some of the most ridiculous campaigns. Coming up after this, we're chatting about how you make sure you don't offend with your campaigns when you are feeding yourself there and you are putting up content and you end up speaking things you shouldn't be saying or offending a big part of your audience. So we chat about that after this. Welcome back to the Business of Influence podcast with me, Leroy
and Tami Rasheen.
We're still chatting about the business of influence, all the highs and the lows that you can go through in the business. Remember to give us your feedback. You can like, comment, and subscribe. And of course, let us know what do you think. And don't forget to turn on the notifications tab so that you can get an alert every time we post a brand new video. So, Tami, last segment, we're chatting about real estate and what influencers need to become influencers and to have their outside life impact their influencer life. But let's chat about the sort of downside of that. Because if you think about businesses and brands as entities, right, who have responsibilities, they need to have some sort of culture. What happens when you have an influencer who almost crosses that line? How much must the brands, or from a strategy point of view as agencies, look after sort of some of the things that the influencers say on behalf of the brands?
So one of the key things is to obviously mitigate this risk.
Yeah.
And it's such a fine line because influencers are voicing their opinions on anything, culturally, brand specific, whatever it may be. And social media channels are there in an instant for influencers just to publish their thoughts, or anyone to publish their thoughts and opinions. So Saudi as an agency as well, we need to make sure that we mitigate that risk for the brands and the businesses who are working with the influencers, because we get asked or requested to vet the influencers, and even go as far back as 6 to 12 months in terms of, has there been any negative posts on the brand by the particular influencer?
So the influencer themselves, have they spoken on the brand
Correct.
before and expressed a negative sentiment about the brand?
Correct. And what is that brand affinity, as well as any negative public exposure or scandals?
So, and this is on
The influencer.
themselves.
Yes.
Have they been in a fight? Have they been
Correct,
called out
correct.
for
Was said
something?
called out for something, said something culturally or ethically unacceptable. So there's various ways and avenues that we look at when it comes to the influencer from a cultural perspective, in terms of the brand affinity and just any positive and or negative sentiment the influencer themselves and related to the brand.
I think influencers also need to remember that as a mouthpiece for the brand, you also need to almost immerse yourself in the world of the brand for a bit.
Yes.
I'm just thinking about, if you are a male and you're chatting about your views on women, if you are, a member of the LGBTI community or not a member of the LGBTI community and you're expressing, your sentiments that might not be popular, you want to err on the side of caution. You want to
Absolutely.
rather not say it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, influencers really just need to take that into consideration. And I think anyone actually,
know,
not just
Tam,
influencers.
I had an experience where someone on a popular platform, I won't tell you what it is, and they were chatting around how they had received or went about getting their driver's license by paying a little something something to someone.
Okay, tell us more.
I mean, I'm gonna say nothing. But for me, it's also usually because we're speaking to cameras as influencers, we don't
Yes.
remember that we're speaking to real life people.
Yes.
And sometimes we admit to things or say things that are a little risky that might not even just have financial liability for the business that you're representing at the time, but can even have criminal liability.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's a multitude of things that influencers need to take into consideration, and even from a content perspective. So we've also had a little situ. For instance, influencer X in fitness space working on a particular brand, and what is being published is very risque, lingerie. So it completely caught our eyeballs in terms of, this is not posted about the brand, but it's not what that particular brand, because they're an ambassador for that brand. So it's not in line with those brands' values.
Yeah, and again, what are you doing to represent that brand? Would you want? Yeah, it's also part of the cancel culture, right? Where is this something that you could potentially have like a fallout with your followers?
Absolutely.
And then they'll call out the brand and say, brand X, is this what? Do you know Leroy's doing this? So it becomes quite delicate in that way.
I just think that proofread before you post, and really, don't act so impulsively. So just take into consideration what you are posting and why.
If you have to vent, do it in a diary. Do it in a diary. When we come back, wrap up this episode and let you know what you can look forward to in the rest of the season.
Thank you.
Hey guys, welcome back. So it's been the first episode of the Business of Influence podcast with myself, Leroy.
And Tami Rasheen.
You're going to hear that a lot over the next season. And we've really been chatting about our experiences in the influencer space and sharing some of our insights from what we've experienced, what we've seen happen, and some of our thoughts about what should really happen in this industry.
Yeah.
And I think in closing this first episode, for me, it's really about trying to get the brands and the influencers talking. There's a lot of miscommunication happening between us. We find that as influencers, we get very frustrated, Tami, because campaign briefs come in and you find yourself fighting for your life and spending money, and then you shoot content and then it's rejected. But what are you looking forward to seeing, sharing, experiencing in this season? And maybe what are the big outcomes that you're hoping we'll get by the end of the season?
I want, the vision is talkability and conversation. So you and I have created a space to have these types of conversations and to kind of clear up these miscommunications, educate, as we had mentioned at the beginning of this episode, and put forward the various challenges that the industry is facing, but not necessarily just the challenges, but and how the industry is exponentially growing. So there's so many avenues that we just want to portray to our ever-growing audience. And also looking forward to having the various guest speakers with their expertise as well. So I think we've got a lot that we're going to be publishing. So I look forward to that.
There's a lot coming. We want this to be a library for you to be able to go back on, for learnings and teachings to come out of. And we also want you to feel that you have contribution to this podcast, so you can share your ideas, what you want us to chat about next, or suggestions on guests. But more than anything, it's an industry that's feeding me. This is how, when I left law 12 years ago, I never thought there'd be a year where I make bank and I'm able to feed myself and my future from this industry. So I'm hoping that I can share some of the insights that I've learned, sometimes through fire, but so that we all get a piece of the pie.
Absolutely.
So it's been absolutely amazing having you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And what's your handle on the socials, Tam?
Mine or Style ID?
Your handles? We go get to Style ID now.
Tami Blend Machine.
At Style ID Africa, I'm at Leroy and everywhere it matches. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
The Business of Influence is a production of Style ID Africa. To learn more, visit www.styleid.co.za.